Today, a vote that could turn the future of this country. Another stimulus package. Congressman Mike Waltz is joining us live this morning on WNDB from Washington, where he'll be in on that vote as it makes its way through Congress. Congressman, good morning. Is there any way this thing can be turned back?
Yeah. Hey, Mark. Good morning. Well, this thing is likely to pass the House this morning. I will vote against it, but it won't be taken up by the Senate. And that's really unfortunate. So you have two things here. Number one, Pelosi crafted this entire monstrosity of a spending bill behind closed doors with a couple of her lieutenants and staff without even input from a lot of her own Democrats, but didn't deal with the administration, nor the Senate, nor the Republicans in the House. And that's really a shame. You know, if she were really serious about helping people that need help, she would have negotiated with all of us so that it would be taken up by the Senate and signed by the president. But that's not what's at play here. This is so Democrats can go back to their districts, you know, kind of like a Christmas tree. Everybody's got their ornament and go back home and say, look what I got into this bill, and then blame the Senate for not taking it up. But Mark, it is full of, it is Green New Deal provisions, union bargaining rights, sanctuary cities, early release for federal prisoners, and on and on and on. It's pretty bad.
There's $25 billion in there for the post office. And the thing that scares me so much, Congressman, is the fact that you don't even want to think about what the pressure it's going to do for future generations, the debt. I mean, we've added, is it $5 trillion we've already added to the debt, and this is going to be another thing on top of it? It's just
That's right.
Awful.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's our children and grandchildren's money, but then geopolitically, this is exactly what China wants us to do. They want us to bankrupt ourselves. Meanwhile, they're stealing our technology in all kinds of different ways, cornering the market in all kinds of areas, important areas like electronics and rare earth minerals. Obviously, we've seen what happened with pharmaceuticals now, and then dominate us economically. And then we really don't have a choice militarily. We won't even be able to afford our military at this rate. The other thing that's scary, Mark, is but for a few Senate seats in this 2020 election, these things would be getting passed into law. And that's what's at stake in this election season.
I'm thinking about where the government could do something constructive without it adding so greatly to the debt. I'm big on incentives to get companies to come back to the United States so that we can reverse this trend of depending on China for pharmaceuticals. Is there any talk on Capitol Hill that you can share with us about how to entice production to happen back in this country that would also give Americans jobs and give us more national security against China controlling our interests?
Oh, there's a number of initiatives. I'm pushing one of them and introduced one of them, which redefines or better defines, the Buy America Act. So the entire federal government, the Department of VA, the Department of Defense Health Service, Health and Human Services, NIH, and on, buy a lot of pharmaceuticals. And the courts have defined the Buy America Act as where the drug was finally assembled. My legislation will redefine it to know where the actual ingredients have to come from the United States. That alone will create a market for domestically produced pharmaceuticals. And I've had a number of calls with major CEOs, and they're taking that. We're working to get that pushed, and Senator Rubio is behind it on the Senate side as well. So those types of things are underway. And if they're not onshored to the United States, then it's nearshoring. That's why USMCA, the new NAFTA deal, was so important. And then, if it just has to be produced overseas, then look at markets like India, Australia, and others that are our allies, and that we can depend upon in a time of emergency. But putting it right here on American shores is the big push, and there's a number of legislative pieces heading in that direction.
Congressman, with 15 states in the last day or so announcing they were going to have partial or some kind of reopening, I'm trying to understand the rationale that in this bill that is to be voted on this morning, why would they extend the $600 benefit to January?
Well, because Well, the belief, and not that I necessarily agree with it, is folks are going to be unemployed that long. The economic situation is going to be that bad. But really, what you're seeing from a lot of these blue state governors like Michigan and now apparently California is they're moving the goalposts. It was flatten the curve, make sure our hospitals don't get overwhelmed, all at once with a more flat curve than a steeper one. Now we're going to keep everything shut down until we have a vaccine, until we have a cure. And so, I don't want to ascribe motives of what's going on there, but that's not what we all talked about as a nation a few months ago when we passed these original stimulus bills. Look, Mark, the federal government cannot print its way out of this problem and provide revenue for every business and every individual, for the rest of this year. It's just not sustainable. But that's what, believe it or not, that's what the Democrats in the House are trying to do.
The president has said firmly no to this bill. I assume the Democrats feel they have enough for override?
Oh, no. What they'll do is he's saying he's not going to sign it. So they will likely barely get it out of the House of Representatives, and it'll just never be taken up in the Senate. And that's it. Right. That's what I mean. It's what they call a messaging bill, so that everybody who got a little goodie in there on the Democratic side can go back in their district and say, well, I got this passed through the House of Representatives, during their campaign. I mean, I'm just being completely candid how this works. But if she were serious about getting it through the Senate and then getting the president to sign it, she would be negotiating like what you saw in the first few stimulus packages. But Pelosi's not. This is just for messaging. This is really because her left and her progressives didn't get everything they wanted in the first few rounds. So she's going to allow them to this time, knowing that it'll never be signed into law. It's really, Mark, to be candid, it's a complete waste of time.
Congressman Mike Waltz joining us live from the nation's capital today on WNDB. Thank you so much for visiting with us, and good luck. Safe travel back to the district. Sorry if I sound frustrated,
but this is frustrating. We could be doing things that could really help, like liability protections and tax holidays, but we're not, sadly.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir. Have a great weekend, sir.